Close your eyes for a moment and picture this. The air is cold enough to see your breath. The last light of the day is fading behind the vineyards. And ahead of you, a small medieval village begins to glow, window by window, like an enormous advent calendar coming to life. Now open your eyes. Welcome to Riquewihr at Christmas. Tonight, we are going to wander through one of the most beautiful Christmas villages in France. A tiny wine village in Alsace that somehow looks even more like a fairy tale in December than it does in summer. Cobblestone streets, colourful timber houses, old city walls and Christmas lights hanging between the roofs like strings of stars. So pour yourself something warm, get comfortable and let us walk together through Riquewihr as it dresses up for the most magical time of the year. Before we talk about Christmas lights and markets, it helps to understand the village behind all the decorations. So, let us start with Riquewihr itself. Riquewihr is a small medieval wine village in the Alsace region of northeastern France, set on the famous Alsace wine route between the Vosges Mountains and the Rhine Plain. It sits just a short drive from Colmar and close to other well-known villages like Riquewihr, Riquewihr and Kaysersberg, but it feels like its own little world, protected by surrounding hills and by rows of vines that climb the slopes around it. The old village is wrapped in a ring of fortifications. There are two belts of walls, with the oldest stones going back to the 13th century and the outer line dating from the 16th century, when the town was at the height of its prosperity. Inside those walls, the street plan, the houses, and even many of the painted signs still follow the pattern of the 15th to 17th centuries. Remarkably, Riquewihr escaped major destruction in both world wars. So when you walk these streets, you are seeing a rare survivor of medieval Alsace almost intact. At the top of the main street stands the Dolder, the tall gate tower that has guarded the village since the late 13th century. It once formed part of the defensive system, austere on the outside face that looks toward the countryside, and more decorative on the village side. Today, you enter under its arch, as visitors have done for centuries, stepping from the modern road outside into a compact historic centre of cobblestones, timber and warmth, coloured plaster. On Christmas market weekends, you can even climb the Dolder for views over the roofs and lights. From the Dolder, the main street gently slopes down through the length of the village. This is Rue du General de Gaulle, a narrow spine lined with traditional half-timbered houses, many of them built in the 16th century. Their upper floors lean slightly over the street, supported by dark beams, while the facades show a mix of pastel colours and carved stone details. Small side alleys branch away toward the ramparts, often opening into tiny courtyards or passageways where you can suddenly find yourself alone, just a few steps away from the main flow of visitors. Riquewihr is not just a museum, it is also a working wine village. The slopes above the town carry the Skinnenberg Grand Cru vineyard, one of the most celebrated sites in Alsace, planted mainly with Riesling, along with Muscat and Pinot Gris. For centuries, wines from these hills were exported across Europe, and even the philosopher Voltaire owned vineyards here. Many of the cellars in the village still belong to long-established wine families, and you can often step straight from the street into a vaulted tasting room where oak barrels once stood. Over the course of a year, the personality of Riquewihr changes with the seasons. In spring, fresh green leaves and the first buds in the vineyards soften the stone and timber. Summer is lively, with visitors filling the terraces, tasting rooms and souvenir shops. Autumn is perhaps the most atmospheric time for the wine itself, when the hills turn gold and orange and the grape harvest brings a different kind of energy to the streets. Through all of this, the basic rhythm of a small Alsatian community continues behind the scenes. People shop in the same narrow lanes where tourists stroll. Children go to school within walls that once sheltered medieval merchants, and the bells of the church still mark the time of day. Now imagine all of that under a winter sky. The vines are bare and the hills are resting. The air is colder often with a fine mist in the mornings. And then, little by little, Riquewihr starts to dress for Christmas. In Alsace, the tradition of Christmas markets goes back centuries, connected to the old Christkindlesmarkt, the markets of the Christ child that were held in towns along the Rhine during Advent. Riquewihr keeps that tradition alive on a scale that fits the village. During the weeks leading up to Christmas, the streets inside the walls turn into a compact but intense Christmas world that combines local customs, religious symbols, and a very strong sense of childhood nostalgia. The Christmas market itself is spread through the historic centre rather than placed in a single big square. There are two main clusters of wooden chalets on Place Voltaire and Place Fernand Zaya. And on busy days, the stalls extend along Rue du General de Gaulle, sometimes with extra stands tucked into courtyards and in a small passage known as Galerie Lee Passage, at number 6 on the main street. This layout means that as soon as you start walking from the Dolder down the hill, you are more or less inside the market without ever feeling that you have entered a separate, dedicated fairground.
Eso de Riquewihr.
Stalls sell the kind of things that suit a small, traditional village market. You will find handmade decorations, wooden toys, glass baubles, candles, advent wreaths, carved nativity figures, textile goods, and plenty of local crafts. There are also stands pouring hot mulled wine, along with hot chocolate and regional drinks. The focus in Riquewihr is more on gifts and decorations than on large-scale street food. For something to eat, you mostly turn to the permanent snack stands and bakeries around the village that serve pretzels, crepes, tarty flamby, sausages, kugelhof, and the little brioche figures called manala.
Oui, c'est ça. C'est une question certainement. On va voir 我手一个在敲门。
Ya, bueno, estaba en una esquina y hemos pasado de largo, no nos por la puerta.
No se compra nunca.
One of the details that visitors notice very quickly is the way the houses themselves join in the celebration. In Alsace, teddy bears have become an important part of Christmas decorations. They appear on balconies, in window boxes, over doorways, and even attached to street lamps, often in groups that look like little families. It started as a playful idea and has become a symbol of warmth, childhood memories, and family spirit during the festive season. In villages like Riquewihr, Colmar, and Kaisersberg, entire facades are turned into scenes with giant stuffed bears, wrapped in scarves or sitting among garlands and lanterns, turning every street into a series of living postcards. As daylight fades, the atmosphere shifts. The half-timbered houses that look charming enough in the sun become something else. Under Christmas lights, strings of warm white bulbs cross the street from one roof to another. Stars, angels, and illuminated snowflakes hang between facades. Window frames are outlined in light, while garlands of fir branches with red ribbons frame shop entrances. Inside, you can see shelves full of Christmas ornaments, traditional Alsatian pottery, and regional food specialities. Outside, breath hangs in the air, and the sounds of conversation in French, German, and other languages blend with recorded carols and the occasional live musician.
Oui, j'allais dans mon casier.
J'ai vraiment de...
Because Riquewihr is small, the Christmas experience is naturally more intimate than in a big city market. You can walk the length of the main street in just a few minutes if you want to. But most people take their time. You stop to look at the details of a window, or to watch a display of toys and gingerbread, or to warm your hands around a cup of mulled wine. The pace encourages you to slow down, to let the village reveal itself bit by bit, rather than rushing from square to square, as you might in a larger town. Many visitors say that this scale is exactly what they are searching for at Christmas. An authentic setting that feels festive without being overwhelming.
No, es que como está haciendo la foto, ponte aquí. Ahora cuando termine. Que no, que espera que termine. Y ponte donde está ahí.
Ya no está haciendo la foto ahora. Así me.
Drop back down now into one of the side streets. This is where Riquewihr reveals its most intimate corners, small passageways, tiny courtyards, wooden balconies and staircases, doors with dates carved above them, window boxes that in summer overflow with flowers and in winter hold pine branches and candles. These parts of the village are often much quieter. You may hear only your footsteps, the distant murmur of the market, and perhaps a church bell. In some windows, you will see Christmas cribs and figurines, sometimes very traditional, sometimes playful. In others, old toys, bears and dolls are arranged as if they are celebrating their own little Christmas. Many visitors say that Riquewihr feels like a real-life version of a village from an animated film. And when you stand here in December, with snow on the roofs and lanterns burning at the doorways, it is not hard to see why.
On va pas rester à Paris.
Just off the main street, we slip into Riquewihr, a narrow little lane that feels almost like a secret. The stones under your feet are the same worn cobbles as the rest of Riquewihr, but It is quieter here. The half-timbered houses lean in closer. The street bends slightly, and you get that cosy feeling of being tucked inside the village rather than just passing through it. Right in the middle of this small street, you find Le Comptoir des Authentiques, a home decor and gift boutique that has become one of the most photographed facades in Riquewihr at Christmas. All along the front of the house, teddy bears are perched on window ledges and balconies, some leaning over garlands of fur, others sitting among lanterns and cushions of artificial snow. Wrapped parcels, glittering snowflakes, and little clusters of baubles are tucked between the bears, so the whole facade looks like a Christmas story that has spilt out into the street. In the evening, warm white lights trace the beams and frame the windows, and the soft glow from inside reaches out onto the cobbles. People stop to take photos, and for a moment, this tiny lane feels like the heart of Christmas in Riquewihr.
Ahí era, 8. Ahí era. La devolvemos. A ver.
Dale una vuelta, dale una vuelta.
Sandra, scusa, stai da partire.
For a village like Riquewihr, Christmas is not just a pretty season. It is part of how people here understand who they are. We are in Alsace, a region that has been a crossroads between the French and German worlds for centuries, and Christmas traditions grew strong here very early. This is the birthplace of Christmas markets in France, where winter fairs linked to Advent and the Christ child have been held since the late Middle Ages, long before the ideas spread to the rest of the country. In Alsace, the weeks before Christmas are built around rituals that mix faith, family and food. Advent wreaths with 4 candles mark the Sundays leading up to the 25th of December, and the story of Saint Nicholas, the Christ child, and sometimes the darker figure of Hans Trapp still appear in local parades and decorations. Families bake bridale or bridala, the little Christmas biscuits, whose recipes are passed down from one generation to the next, and share them with neighbours and friends. All of this creates a rhythm that the whole region feels, from big cities like Strasbourg to small wine villages like Riquewihr. Riquewihr leans into that rhythm in a very deliberate way. Local people and the town itself work together to keep what they call the authentic spirit of the Alsatian Christmas alive. The village dresses its old wine houses and ramparts with lights and fir branches, sets up a traditional market that focuses on crafts and seasonal food, and makes sure that every street and corner feels like a continuation of those older customs. It is not only about attracting visitors, it is also about passing on a sense of warmth, generosity, and shared celebration to the next generation inside these same walls.
Allez là. Oh Mario, on cherche après toi. Ben oui, moi on cherche après vous.
On pensait que t'étais perdu.
Mais il faut pas où.
Voilà, il faisait un club dans toute la vie.
Ah ouais.
Muore.
Christmas in Alsace is very much about flavour. Local traditions mention the smell of gingerbread, the crunch of little Christmas biscuits, and the comforting heat of wine flavoured with orange and spice. In Riquewihr, like in many Alsatian towns, bakers prepare bridel, the small festive biscuits that come in many shapes and flavours, from simple butter and vanilla to cinnamon, nut, anise or jam-filled versions. Another treat you might see in our walk is manala, soft brioche figures shaped like little people. They are traditionally linked with St. Nicholas Day at the start of December, but you often find them all through the Advent period. Children eat them with hot chocolate and clementines. Adults are usually happy to copy them. Local food stalls and winstubs give you a different kind of Christmas comfort. A winstub is a traditional Alsatian eatery, usually simple, warm and full of wood. This is where you might sit down for choucroute loaded with sausages and pork, a slow-cooked meat and potato stew called bakey hof, or a thin bread-like base baked with cream, onions and bacon that people here love as tart flamby. After walking cold streets for hours, stepping into one of these places feels like being wrapped in a blanket.
Ahorita no. Ay, sí, yo voy a ir ahí.
C'est beau, mon gars, t'as vu la lumière au-dessus de nous? Ah ouais. T'as vu comment c'est beau?
At the heart of the Christmas market in Place Fernand Zaya, everything seems to orbit around one thing: the Christmas tree. As you step into the square, past the circle of wooden chalets and the glow of their little counters, your eye is pulled straight to it. A tall, perfectly shaped fir standing right in the middle of the market, like the village's own winter lighthouse. By day, you can see every detail: classic red and gold baubles, strands of ribbon, wooden ornaments and stars tucked deep into the branches. By night, the tree turns into a column of warm light, wrapped in hundreds of tiny bulbs that cast a soft glow over the cobblestones and the roofs of the stores. Children run around the base. Couples stop here for a photo with the city hall and the halo of lights behind them. And for a few minutes, this little square feels like the core of Christmas in Riquewihr. A simple tree, but dressed so carefully that it ties the whole market together.
Ay, otro por la escalera. Tenemos que hacer contacto.
Quand il est plein, on achète. Quand il est plein.
Quand on mettait un petit banquier, quand on mettait les savons, les mains.
If you visit early in the day, the village has a softer, gentler atmosphere. You can really study the woodwork, the painted signs of the inns and wine cellars, and the way the village is nestled between three hills, protected from the north winds by the Schoonenberg vineyard. Later in the afternoon, as more people arrive and the sky turns dark, the energy rises. The same street that felt like a museum in the morning turns into a warm and busy Christmas scene by evening, when the lights and decorations really take over. As night settles fully, the village becomes even more theatrical. The sky above the dark outline of the vineyards is almost black. The facades shine in their pastel colours under the street lamps. Stars and angels hang between the houses. Some windows are framed by curtains of light, others by huge wreaths and red bows. This is when the village really becomes a Christmas scene. Practically every building along the main street carries garlands, fairy lights, or some kind of whimsical decoration.
On est en bas et il y a toutes mes tantes qui sont là en bas, tu vois.
Per il Natale dopo.
C'est que tu sens.
C'est là qu'on aurait dû aller.
Mais c'est en haut.
L'amour.
For centuries, Riquewihr lived from the production and sale of its wine. First controlled by the Lords of Horburg, then sold in the 14th century to the Dukes of Württemberg, it developed as a classic wine village, a Winzerdorf trading Alsatian and German wines right across Central Europe. In the 16th century, the town converted to Protestantism, and many of the grand houses you see today date from that period of prosperity, when money from the Schoenenberg vineyards above the village paid for carved stone doorways, elegant staircases, and richly decorated facades. The look of the village comes from that golden age. Most of the houses along the main street are traditional Alsatian half-timbered buildings with a visible wooden frame and infill in plaster or brick. More than 100 of these houses survive from the 15th and 16th centuries, often painted in soft colours with steep roofs and little overhanging upper floors that lean slightly over the street. This type of construction was practical at the time because timber frames could be adapted or raised as families grew, and damage could be repaired without rebuilding the whole house. Today, it gives Riquewihr that very recognisable Alsace postcard look, where every facade seems to have its own personality. The reason everything still feels so complete is that Riquewihr was never heavily damaged in the big conflicts of the 20th century. While other towns in the region were bombed, this one came through both world wars with its ramparts, its gate towers and most of its old houses intact. The entire historic core, including the line of the walls and the defensive Dolder Tower at the top of the main street, still follows the medieval plan. Because of that, the village is often described as a living open-air museum. At the same time, it is a normal community, not a recreated site. People still live in these houses, go to school behind these walls, and work in these cellars. Preserving that balance has taken conscious effort. Riquewihr is protected as national heritage, and there are strict rules on what you can change on the outside of a building. Renovation work has to respect traditional materials, colours and shapes. Old inns and wineries have been converted into small hotels or apartments without erasing original beams, courtyards or wells. Local museums and the Dolder itself explain how the village grew around its fortifications and how daily life worked inside a walled wine town. All of this means that when you walk through Riquewihr today, you are not looking at a modern reconstruction. You are moving through streets that have genuinely evolved over many centuries and been carefully looked after. Above everything, literally and figuratively, is the vine. The slopes around the village, especially the Grand Cru Schonenberg Hill, are planted with Riesling and other Alsatian varieties that have been famous since at least the early modern period. The soil and the sheltered microclimate here make it one of the classic white wine sites of Europe, and the wealth from that trade is written directly into the stone and timber of the town. When you see a carved grape cluster on a beam or a wrought iron sign with a bunch of grapes hanging above a cellar door, that is the village telling you exactly what built it and what still keeps it alive.
À chaque fois, après, ils changent la veille. C'est pas la veille, ils changent le dessus. Rigolo. Palissandre.
Now is not the best day.
Pour aller jusqu'à graver.
Ça y est, le il y a moins de temps. Il faut avoir un paquet de jours.
La dernière
Before we leave, take one last look back down the main street. From up near the Dolder, the view is pure storybook. The houses fall away in a gentle slope. Their roofs in a staggered pattern, all wrapped in garlands and light. Beyond them, in the dark, you know the vineyards are sleeping under their winter blanket, waiting for spring. Riquewihr at Christmas is exactly that combination. A working wine village and a carefully preserved heritage town. A real place where people live, and at the same time a scene so beautiful that it hardly feels real. Thank you for walking here with us. Wherever you are watching from, we hope this little village in Alsace has brought you a bit of warmth, a bit of calm, and a bit of Christmas magic.
J'adore.